everyone, to the Seek, Go, Create podcast. This is your host, Tim Winders. This is where we redefine success in leadership, business, and ministry. And our guest today is going to be able to communicate with us on all three of those levels because he touches all of those arenas. And so we're gonna have a great conversation. I'm excited about it. Before I get to our guest though, let me just ask one big, huge favor from all of you. Go to seekgocreate.com as soon as the podcast is over, not right now, but go to seekgocreate.com as soon as the podcast is over. And I'd like for you to go to the bar right up top where you could put your email address in and give us your best email address. Here's the reason why. We are always doing giveaways. We're always letting people know when we're putting episodes out and also bonus stuff. And we want you to participate in that. We've also been known to communicate back and forth with some of our community, and I really would love to have communications with all of you. So make sure we have your email address so we can do that. And we'd love to hear from you. Ask questions, give us feedback, comment, and just start by going to Seek, Go, Create, and we can connect there. That's a great place to do that. Great place to do all that connecting. So anyway, today we have Mike Thakur as our guest. I think he's coming to us from Houston, Texas. Is that right, Mike? Are you in Houston right now?
Well, so I live in Houston, but I'm actually in Dallas today. So I'm just playing with you. Oh my God.
Well, for those of us that don't live in Texas, Dallas, Houston, they're kind of the same. Hey, Mike is the CEO at WorkLodge. He's the founder of the Gabriel Project and a podcaster on a mission to change lives through entrepreneurship. And I have a strong belief that we're going to touch on all of those. Mike, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
Yeah, great to have you, Mike. First question I like to ask, I gave you a little bit of prep. The listener knows that this is what I like to ask people. What do you do? We bump into each other, or maybe we're on an elevator or something, maybe sitting on a plane. Some of these things I can't even imagine nowadays, but let's just say we bump into each other and I say, hey, Mike, what do you do? What do you tell people when they ask you that question?
You know, it's going to be some variation of, we build these amazing workspaces and make them accessible to small, mid-sized businesses. And then we take the money we make there and we go change the world with it through the Gabriel Project. Wow.
Okay. So, man, there's a lot there. And I'm trying to decide if I want to dive into that now or if I want to pause for a second. Well, before I do that, there was something that I read on, it might've been your LinkedIn or something like that. And it said something about you, we're going to get to all those things, but it said something about you hold a Guinness Book of World Record. You have a record in Guinness Book of World Records. Is that right? Okay. Or is that just like resume fluff? Come on.
So I was recently involved with the Podfest event. I was one of the speakers on the spiritual track. And so because we were part of that, they got a world record for the largest number of live listeners to a podcast event. And so I think I've got some certificate coming that says I was part of that, world record breaking attempt. So listen, I'm going to claim it. I'm going to put it on my wall because it sounds cool, and it could go right here next to Zebra Guy, but I don't know. It probably needs to live in my office at home. So,
I love that. I attended that event. I don't know that I'll get a certificate, and I don't know that I could claim it like you're claiming it, but that was a great event, had record numbers of people attending that virtual event. So that was fun. So you are a Guinness, an actual Guinness World Record holder. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. I'll believe it when I see the certificate. I got my mailing notice saying it was on the way. So let's see what it says.
I'm sure you'll have to frame it. You got to frame something like that. I mean, that's not something that you get every day. I mean, a lot of people get college diplomas and things, but a Guinness Book of World Records is impressive. So
yeah, that's pretty cool,
Yeah. All right, Mike, you have a lot of things going on. And one of our themes here at Seek, Go, Create is redefining success. At one point, it was about just talking about success, but what we really realize is that there's this whole redefining that goes on. It's just a theme that we've seen in almost all of our episodes. I think I heard or read that you have had 5 startups, I think, in nonprofit and business space. I am sure you've learned a ton over the years from those, but I think what I'd love for you to do first is for myself and for the listener, just give us a quick, and I know it's tough when you've got startups because they're kind of like your children, you want to talk about them and all that. And I'm the same way, but can you give us just a blurb or a few blurbs about each one? And then maybe we'll pick a few to dive in a little bit deeper. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, professionally, I spent a number of years working for a couple of large companies, billion-dollar companies in the UK, in the technical field, reselling computer systems, high-end IT solutions, that kind of stuff. And so I left there, started my first company. It was an internet consultancy back in the 90s, pre-Google. Remember when Google launched and I was over the moon that I could actually search for something and find it? If you remember Excite and Alta Vista and all that cool stuff, they're not around anymore. There's a reason for that. So then my second startup was an electronics reselling business, and had some fun with that for a little while. We started a church in the US back in 2010, and did that for a number of years. And a friend of mine took over that actually on the north side of Houston. And then WorkLodge would, I guess, count as number four, for-profit business in the co-working and the flex office space. And then the Gabriel Project would be number five, a 501c3 in the state of Texas. And founded that one in 2014.
Wow. Good job there. Good job there, giving us a good overview of it. All right. So there's a few things that I want to do. I want to kind of jump back to the 90s. One of the things that I love to do is I guess dig into someone's path, how they've ended up to where they are today. And I know this from listening to your podcast, a little bit of your background, and you kind of, I don't know if meander would be the correct term, but you've done a number of things. And what I want to ask is, what are some of the things that you look back on that you would say, ooh, that was super successful? And then what are some of the things that you go, we're going to get to learning points. So we get more learning sometimes from the things that weren't, but, and then also any of them that maybe you go, that might be something I would do differently if I were doing it today. First of all, super successful. Give us the high points, and then maybe we'll look for some of the lows.
Well, I think, professionally, I think on the early years, I came out of college. My wife and I thought we were going to move to the US, funnily enough. And we had some issues with visas and things. It didn't pull off. And so we kind of went to plan B. And, I just picked up this regular gig, probably what you would equate to a CompUSA, big box computer kind of superstore back in the 90s, and started there. And, got promoted a few times, kind of went my way up the ranks, relatively quickly. And I think overall, I had a great time there. Met some great people. My first business partner actually was my manager in one of those locations. And I went back to work with them years later, and ended up running the sales teams that sold to government. We sold to local and central government. And I think at the time we were probably the largest sales teams in the entire business, and it did about $1 billion in revenue. Our teams then, I don't know, the exchange rates changed, but I think it was probably 90 or 100 million or so a year in sales that we did. And it was fun. I mean, it was a time to grow, and I was probably a little bit hyper focused, and I'm sure not the easiest guy to work for, but we delivered, and we delivered consistently, and that's what counts when you're in sales, right?
Right, absolutely. So you mentioned the word hyper focused, which many say is a characteristic of, we'll call them entrepreneurs. I don't really like the term serial entrepreneurs because I don't really necessarily know what that means. I mean, when it's time to do something else, you just go do something else. When it's time to shut it down, you shut it down or sell it or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
But hyper focused is a word. I'm in my mid 50s. I think you're in your mid 40s. And I'm wondering if that term hyper focused means something different to you today than it did in the 90s, which is coming on almost 30 years ago. So and the reason is I ponder that quite a bit. I really do wonder about where my energy goes, if that makes any sense. Talk to me about that a little bit, about how hyper focus may have changed for you. If not, if it's the same, then that's cool too.
Yeah, I think, I think for me, the way my mind processes information is very singular. And that's not to say that I can only think of one thing and I can never think of something else. But really, there's definitely one thread, and it's go big or go home. Like mentally, my brain just naturally goes there, and so everything else just falls by the wayside. And I don't mean this as an excuse or as an explanation to make it okay or not. And I'm not going to say I forget every birthday, but if I get in the zone, I can go 16, 18 hours straight, at a computer screen and not even blink, move, or anything, and I'd probably look like a statue. And I could do that days and weeks on end. The world could pass me by, and I just wouldn't know. And I think even now, probably sometimes folks who work around me struggle with that a little bit because it is a little different to typical. And I don't know that it's really evolved in a positive or a negative way. It just seems to be the way I'm wired, and I don't know how else to say it. I'm working on it. I'm trying to pay more attention to, what's happening around me, and the soft, kind of warmer, fuzzier, fluffier stuff. But I don't process information that way. It's, I've got to achieve this. I've got to make it happen. To do that, it's X, Y, Z. And I think in steps and, process and those kind of things.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It is interesting though. I've been changing my lifestyle over the last few years, and I'm noticing what I'm working on is I'm trying, and I don't know why, it's just an experiment. I do these experiments all the time, Mike. I'm trying to have times where I shut down the brain and I'm not focused on anything. It's not working out great, just so you know. But I'm giving it a shot. So anyway, maybe it's something that I should just give up on and not worry about it. But at what point you came over here, if I recall, to be involved with ministry, and I know you've always been involved with business and ministry, but had there been times in your life where you were going to go full-time ministry? And have there been times in your life where you've said, to heck with the ministry, I'm going full-time business? Or are you always a hybrid?
I think it's probably ebbed and flowed. When I was in the UK working, in the IT business, I wasn't probably really involved for years with ministry stuff. Then when we came here, we spent 4 or 5 years entirely on ministry stuff with nothing else in between. And then it started to hybrid again. And, and now it's kind of switched the other way where the primary focus is obviously business and entrepreneurship. And definitely the nonprofit work is there. But from a time perspective, it's a small percentage of the time compared to trying to build a business and, and grow something.
Right. So, all right. So then would you say, do you lead with one and it spills over to the other? Or, and the reason I ask this question too, I'll kind of tell you my intent. I had an interview with someone named Mike Bear a while back. He was an episode that came in February, and he was a full-time pastor that felt the Lord lead him into business. And he and I did some business together in the late 90s. He's a consultant and great guy. He's a guy that invented the term business as missions, by the way. So wrote the book on it and everything like that. But he kind of tells the story of when he left being a pastor, that his ministry friends kind of looked down on him because he was going into the business world. Because it's kind of like there's this pecking order, full-time ministry, and then, down to, then there's the business people. Have you ever seen that? Or is that something that's just unique to a few people? I mean, I guess when you came to know the Lord, were you thinking that full-time ministry is the ultimate, everything else kind of fed it, or no?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, as a kid growing up, so I was saving when I was 9. I think by the time I was 13, I thought I was going to be, the next Billy Graham, whatever, big time preacher. And I think even now, some days I still wrestle with the fact that I give so much of my time to the for-profit side of things. Sometimes I feel like I'm stealing from, the mission and the ministry side of things, and wish that I had a little bit more freedom to focus on those things. So I think subconsciously there's something there. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I think subconsciously in my own, there's something there that I would potentially be more effective or more useful if I could create more time for ministry stuff. And I think as people in general, I think we're all geared to value what we're involved in most. So I suspect most business guys would look at somebody leaving the business world to go into church ministry thinking, dude, what are you doing? And I think most pastors would look at someone leaving the ministry going to the business world thinking, what are you doing? And I think it's just human nature more than either of them trying to be, that opinionated. If I don't know that they've really thought about it in those terms.
Yeah, that's good because I do think some people wrestle with it, some don't. I remember I was actually saved around a business setting, so I started getting around church, and I kind of felt like I was supposed to do something in full-time ministry. And then years later, I just realized I'm really good at business, or at least I'm pretty good at business. I have to be careful saying that. I mean, it's kind of like the way I'm wired. And I'm not so sure that what a lot of us do is not ministry, which kind of leads me to I really want to know more, and the listener know more about what you're doing with WorkLodge, because anyway, well, we'll talk about it, and then there's a few other questions I want to ask, because to me, you have the opportunity to minister in that environment is as much, if not more, than many church type environments. So tell us about WorkLodge, how it formed up, what all it does, where all you're located now. Just give us a good description of what's happening there.
Yeah, so I was in my previous role. I used to be the chief operating officer for a security company, and we did very boutique security for very successful people. And so when I wasn't traveling, I was working from home. Did it for about 4 or 5 years, and like most people, it gets old, relatively quickly, especially when you've got kids at home. So one day I had this great idea. I'm going to go get an office to work in, but I didn't want to get a big office because we didn't do that as a company. And I didn't know anything about commercial real estate. I came across this executive suite space, whatever that meant, and I went to look, and they take me down this hallway, and there's no people anywhere. I can't see a soul. And she takes me into this interior office, and it's 4 walls of solid drywall, a solid wood door. And it's the only single person office I've got available. It's like $800 and something a month. And I'm standing there thinking, dude, this is worse than being at home. Like I could stare at my own walls at home. I remember literally having that thought. And so I went home and said to my wife, I said, babe, I looked at this office space today, and frankly, it was terrible and it was full. And I said, I don't understand, why are there no places that someone can go to work? Again, I work for some bigger companies. They're nice office facilities. They're almost campuses, especially when you work for a really big company. Why is it this little guy can't do that? Well, there's no way I can afford the infrastructure. I can't build something like that. So I said, I couldn't do a worse job than these guys. And if they can fill that, we can build something that somebody would want to go to work at, and we can make it better. And obviously this is back in like 2013. Co-working is not a thing. I just thought I had a really good idea, and evidently, a few folks beat me to it. And now everybody's having the same idea. So it's a whole different world. But that's what brought me into WorkLodge. So the heart was, how do we build an environment where small and mid-sized business owners can come in, they can focus on business, and we'll take care of all of that friction of facilities, and we'll create this business community, or this kind of network of people where they can build meaningful, actual relationships with people they're going to see on a regular basis, and have solid conversations about what are you dealing with running a business today? Dude, I'm struggling with this, or I'm having issues with this. How have you handled it? We just wanted that involvement and that kind of two-way communication flow to be very natural and very organic. And so we started out in Houston. We built in the suburbs first. Didn't want to be downtown. I live in the burbs and I don't want to drive. So I figured other people probably don't either. And so we got 2 locations on the north side of town there. And then this is our 3rd one in Dallas. So we opened right when COVID hit. So we timed it beautifully.
Yeah, perfect, right? Right when COVID hit, everybody wants to be in co-working spaces then, right? So
Absolutely.
I may get to that in just a second, but there's a word you brought up. You brought up networking and community. I think may have been a word you threw in there, and there's some other things. And, I think you and I had a brief conversation a few weeks back, and I may have shared this with you, but one of the things that's fascinated me is that as we travel, is as a follower of Christ, as I know you are, at times I read the word and I kind of hunger for some of the examples that we see, like the early church, for example. We see the examples from the early church and I just go, wow, what do we have today that is like the early church. And Mike, I got to tell you, in all my travels, there's really only a few examples that I think are close. And one of it is the startup world that we see. And I've been in and out of it, Atlanta startup and Austin and the Bay Area and Seattle. And I know you guys have startup areas there in Dallas and Houston. And then the other one is the coffee shop culture, where people just go and kind of hang out and mingle and interact, and they're kind of working on their own, but they're in the same place. And then the other is the co-working spaces. And I've always thought you combine all of that, which you kind of do, that it may be, and I'll just ask you this, am I correct or not? It may be the closest thing we have to the Book of Acts church. Yes or no?
Yeah, I think if we could nail it and get it right, I think you're absolutely spot on. I was having a conversation this morning driving up with a friend of mine who owns some coffee shop / co-working spaces, and like full on coffee shop where you can, walking off the street, as a member of the public can buy. And I said to him, I think the diffusion there is it's so clear. Starbucks nailed it. They opened micro community centers all over, the world. And I think no matter what, COVID's proven it, people need to be connected to other people. We are built in the image of a God who is 3 in 1. There is clearly something there. He isn't an island, and we aren't made to be that either.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of things. This, I think, is a great time to ask you this. I read this somewhere, and I'm going to read these and ask you to speak to each one of them. You said you're interested in exceptional service. You're interested in helping people. And then you're also interested in people spiritually because they're valuable and you care. But I think while we're talking about the business aspect, you mentioned earlier, if we're able to nail it, if we're able to really put the pieces together, that we may be close to that. What are those pieces, and how does exceptional service fall into that?
Yeah, well, I think the idea of the exceptional service and really the heart of where we're coming from is the Bible says, look, whatever you're doing, do it as if you're doing it for God, right? So clearly all of my staff don't believe what I believe. Some of them do, some of them don't. But the idea is, look, if Jesus walked through the door and wanted to get himself an office, would we treat him any different? Would this level of service be okay? Would we show him the special office, or would we show him any office? Would we charge him a different price? Because if we do anything differently for him, then we're not treating everybody else the way we should be. And that's the goal. And so for us, an exceptional experience doesn't mean I'm giving you free breakfast every day, but it does mean that, I'm going to remember the names of your guests when they walk in. I'm going to remember the fact that you told me your kid was getting an award last week, and how did it go at the ceremony, and actually be genuinely interested. And this is the hard thing. And this is what I mean when I say, well, if we nail it, because I can ask you to do something, with somebody that works alongside me or works for me, whatever you want to call them. And I can say, hey, listen, let's make sure we check the coffee every day at 9 a.m. And if you are not bought into the vision or the DNA or the mission of what we're trying to do, you're going to check a checkbox on the checklist that says I check the coffee at 9 a.m. every day. But if you bought into what we're doing and you believe in what we're doing, you're not going to need a checklist, because you're going to want to make sure the coffee's warm, that there's enough of it, and all these other things that go around it, it tastes right, because you care about the fact that someone's going to walk up to that coffee pot and drink from it, and you want them to have a great cup of coffee. And that's the bit that I've wrestled with, and I think most business owners wrestle with, because everybody isn't an owner. And so how do we get them excited about what we're doing, and how do we get them to care enough? I don't make any more money whether somebody drinks 10 cups of coffee from me or 1 cup of coffee from me, because we give it away for free. I just care that if they want 10 cups of coffee, they have 10 great ones. And I care about that because they are valuable, because they were made in God's image just like me.
Yeah, that's good. So you mentioned that there's challenges as an owner, manager, leader, whatever, to I guess inject that mindset into the organization. I know people and have spoken to people that have come into your office space, to your spaces, and they speak extremely highly of it. I'm going to be traveling cross country soon. I might pop in and do a visit. But what are some practical things that you have done to I guess, get that exceptional service mindset? And listen, we know there's not perfection. I mean, we would love certain things. And you know what? I think we ought to say this too. it's not all followers of Christ that are good at it. There are some people that are just wired to be. I wish they were. Some Christians need to be kinder, don't they? They really do. But practical for the person that might be listening that runs a lawn care business, or that has a large company, or is even in ministry, and they just want their people to treat people with that respect and all. What are some things you've done? What are some practical things?
So I think one of the things we did very early on was we articulated some core values and some guiding principles. And so for us as a business, our overriding core value is to be amazing. That's what we talk about. That's what I sign my emails with. And so we break that out and say to be amazing means we're going to be authentic, we're going to be passionate, we're going to be generous, we're going to be humble, and we're going to have some personality. We're going to be a little bonkers, which is an English phrase if you're not familiar with it. And so the idea is if you can start to really get those things, working at an inner level, you'll have some idea of who we're trying to be. And then we layered on top of that some guiding principles, said, okay, look, I can't write a policy book that's going to tell you everything you need to do in every situation of every day. I'm going to give you some principles to follow. The first one is do what's best for the business. And that can be interpreted a number of ways, but obviously taking care of our members is best for the business. So wherever possible, we want to take care of them to the best of our ability, but also not throwing away, 10 full cups of coffee a day is best for the business. So don't overmake it at 4:30 if we don't need to. You can apply it in a number of different ways. And there's a couple of other things as well. And they're just simple, practical tips. And the hope is, if you process your situation at any point in time, if you're thinking, how am I supposed to be handling this right now? Whether it's a complaint, whether it's somebody wanting to learn more about the space or whatever, if you process it through that lens, you should have the answers you need and you should have the direction that you need. And then the second thing for me is, and probably to my detriment here, I still spend most of my working days in the front of house world, interacting, being involved with the business. And it definitely creates some challenges for me on the back end, because I've still got other things I'm supposed to do as a leader and also as a business owner. So I got to make time to do those. But I want to do that, one, because I genuinely love serving the folks we serve. And so I love to be around them. I love to talk to them. I want to be in that environment. And two, I want to do that so I can try and model for the other team members. They can just watch and see. And again, not that I'm perfect, but hopefully they'll see some good things and it'll rub off and it'll give them some ideas about, okay, well, might do this way. Hey, I can even improve that and do it better still.
Yeah, that's good. And I actually wrote down the word model, and then you said it shortly after that, because it's very difficult if you were sitting in an office in the very back of the building and no one ever saw you, for anyone to see that. So I think that's powerful. Do you guys, I know we're in a unique time where, at the time we're recording this, fall-ish of 2020, the actual podcast might release late 2020. I don't think this will be over totally. I don't know what you guys are projecting, but can you share with us the impact that it had back in the spring of this year when COVID and all hit? Maybe the impact not just to you and your bottom line, if you want to share that, but maybe some of your members, the people that come and go, and what you saw from people, employees, and then maybe fast forward to what you see happening in the future. So look back and then look to the future and share what, not that we can predict, but share that with us.
I think we've been in a position where we've seen a really wide range of situations unfold. And I think that's natural because we're around so many people. And so I think, from a staffing perspective, we've seen the anxiety, the fear, the worry, the nervousness. We obviously tried hard to keep staff as long as we could, but we weren't able to keep everybody. Not just because we didn't want to keep them. Some of them went and found something else, and I get that, and that's okay. We've definitely seen the ugly side of people, which has been tough. We've definitely seen a couple of members actually have businesses fail. And that's been really tough. I think for me personally, because I'm an entrepreneur and my heart does go out to the folks that we serve, to see somebody having spent years building something and then for it to just evaporate. Now, will it come back? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. but still to see them. I remember getting a phone call from a member, and he was in tears on the phone. And you know, all of his orders were cancelled. I mean, just almost overnight, you know, pretty much everything was gone. And he didn't know what to do. He'd been in business for 35 years. What do you do when that's all you've done? And I didn't have an answer for it. You know, I can't fix it. I wish I could. You know, I wanted to, but I don't know how to. So that was challenging. I think for me personally, one of the hardest things was walking down the hallways of a building. We build pretty big co-working spaces. So we're talking about 100 plus offices in our spaces. And our offices range from a one person all the way up to like a 30, 35 person suite. So they're meaningful sizes. To walk through a facility like that was buzzing with hundreds of people, and now there's all of a sudden 5 or 10, you feel like you're walking through a cemetery. I mean, just at an emotional level, for me as an owner, it was eerie some days. Now, thankfully, you know, we've started to move forward away from that again. And that's not to say everybody, you know, cancelled and left, but working from home or whatever, it's just been really, really surprising, I think, in so many different ways and on so many different levels. And, you know, one of the harder things practically is, you know, I'm not trying to get political here, but, you know, when you go throw a ton of money at people with unemployment checks and stuff, well, it makes it an awful lot harder to go and recruit when some folks are happy to stay at home and not do any work and, you know, and still make what appears to be actually pretty decent money. And again, I'm not trying to be political, but it's something we've wrestled with as we've tried to rehire and, you know, and get the staffing levels back up.
Yeah. And I agree that could be a political thing, but in all honesty, I think that there were some that were just trying to solve a situation. It's just now, how do we back out of it? You know, it's kind of like as a leader of a company, if you start paying someone more than the value, then what do? You can't back that back down. So that's definitely an issue we're going to deal with. I'm curious because one of the things that I see in what we were talking about earlier, the coffee shop culture and even the you know, startup world and the co-working space is the energy from just the people, the buzz, or the, you know, I think it's if you nailed it. And when you talked about it earlier, you're nailing it when people walk in and they just feel something.
Yeah.
How does that change when you've got offices with 100 and you're 20% or 30% or 10%? And will it get back to 100? I mean, that's kind of future looking, but what, like you said, it was almost depressing, but you know, I tell you, I'll give an example outside of your work. It depresses me to see some of these sports events with nobody in the stands.
Right.
And I'm almost wondering, should they even be doing it? I mean, is it really that important for us? If it's really a something we should be taking cautions, let's not play baseball. And I know a lot of people get upset about that, and that's kind of political too, unfortunately. But where's it going, Mike? How can we recreate this, or what will it look like? Can we get that energy? Because I'm like you, I thrive in that energetic arena.
Right. Well, I think, you know, I think there's a couple of thoughts here as I'm listening to the question. I think first of all, and again, not trying to be political at all, the ultimate problem here is money, right? The games have to get played because players are on contracts that pay big salaries, and the franchise owners have paid big money to be in the franchise, and the advertisers pay big money to have their name in front of people. And so if you took away the dollar, I don't think they would be playing right now. I think common sense would have prevailed, and, you know, it would be very different. But that's the reality of the world we live in. I have the same challenges. My rent's still due. My bills are still due. You know, things didn't change for me, and, you know, we didn't get any help. And you know, is it going to come back? Absolutely. I think it's going to come back, and I think it's going to come back even more so. You know, one, again, everybody's got different theories about how real or not real COVID is, and, you know, whether they know somebody or not who's been sick, and is there really going to be a vaccine? The reality is the majority of the world is still alive. Obviously, some people have passed away, and that's terrible, but
Yeah.
a lot of people pass away with a lot of different things, you know, on any given day, in any given year. So we've got to keep that perspective as well. But I think what 2020 is going to show most people in retrospect is how much we are wired for community. You can't take it away. It's inherent in who we are as people. And whether that community is around a sports game, whether it's around a coffee shop, whether it's around a workspace, whether it's around Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's around a TV show, I don't care what you call it. The reason social media is so successful is people want to feel connected to other people. And as a society, we are lacking in that. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And you cannot beat human interaction. As good as this is, it's not the same as if we were chatting in real life. So it has to come out.
Well, I was going to ask that, is that everybody's trying to do it virtually or digitally. And I think it was kind of a cool novelty for a short period of time.
Right.
And I'm picking up, and maybe you've got some insight on this too. I'm picking up that as this gets longer, that people aren't thriving as much as they were initially. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. We didn't see a lot of success. We tried a couple of, online virtual kind of, get-togethers early on. We didn't see a lot of success with our membership base. Now we typically are built in the suburbs, so these are folks with families and kids at home and that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that has a part to play. But no, I think you're absolutely right. The longer this goes, the more people are tired and fed up of having to engage on a screen, and they want to get out and just be natural, in real life.
Yeah. Mike, I want to talk about the Gabriel Project, and then also I want you to give our audience some information about the podcast you've recently started. But there's one thing that I like to ask someone who's in a position like you're in. You've done well in business. You've done well or participated. I don't know how we compare well in ministry. You've been a minister. How there are so many people in roles that struggle with money. And when I say struggle with money, maybe the definition of it, maybe the pursuit of it, maybe an abundance of it, or maybe a lack of it. And let's just go and say the church world kind of struggles with perceptions of money. Can you give us kind of where you developed your mindset around money? And has that changed over the years as you've succeeded, and some businesses have done really well, some maybe not? You've worked in ministry. Talk about money for a little while. Educate us on your thought process.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I think last week's podcast episode was about money. My thoughts on money: I hate money. I hate what money does. I hate what it stands for. I hate what it does to society. I hate what it does to the world. I hate what it does to people. The amount of people who do something every day that they don't want to do because they need a paycheck, it's heartbreaking when you stop and think about it. And I know the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. And I don't think everybody's out there loving money when they just need to pay a bill. We live in a world where you have got two forces colliding, and I see a spiritual element here as well as a natural. Call them the devil, call it supernatural, call it whatever you want. The reality is there is one negative force that needs to control and dictate. And one of the ways that you can do that is by making it so that to function, you need something else. And so, for example, if mortgages didn't exist, houses wouldn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars because nobody could buy them. But because a system created a mechanism where you could borrow more to pay for more, well, now things can get more expensive. But then what happens is you get trapped because now I want more, right? And now I had to get a bigger home or whatever. Or maybe I didn't want a bigger home. I just had to pay a lot because I live in LA and I don't want a 3-hour commute, but that's where I chose to live. And again, I'm not trying to be political. I'm not trying to, but the reality is there are these two opposing forces. As people, we get ourselves to a place. And I think that's why Dave Ramsey's so popular. Like when you are debt free, and to be clear, I'm debt free. I don't believe in debt. We have no venture backers, no partners, no nothing. When you get to a place where you are basically on the hook, well, now you just became a slave to something, and the Bible talks about that. It says, don't be that person. I don't know if it's Proverbs or somewhere in the Old Testament, but it says don't be a slave to anything. When you start borrowing, it's a challenge, and I think that translates to I learned very early on to live relatively modestly. And look, I mean this relatively clearly. I'm not driving a 20-year-old car. I mean, hands up, let's be clear. I'm not buying my clothes at a thrift store. So I say that respectfully, but I learned very quickly, don't spend more than you make. never done the credit card thing, never racked up a ton of debt. I've just always had this prescient kind of mindset of, I've got to be cautiously optimistic. Cash is king. Get some money in the bank, save it for the rainy day, just keep it there. I'm sure that all the financial investment guys out there would look at, you know, my financial management and say, what are you doing? But I need money for a rainy day. You know, I don't need it all in a volatile place where it's going up and down and everything else. And maybe that day will come, but that'll come when I can play that game as if I'm playing, you know, a blackjack at Vegas. I can't do that with my life savings. I can't do that with the, you know, the few dollars that I have. And I talk about this on the podcast. You know, it was John Wesley who said something to the effect of, you know, when I was making £50 a week, I lived on 45. But when I was making £75 a week, I was living on 45. But there's a lesson there. Whether you want to give it all to God, whether you want to save some of it and give some of it, that's your call. But there is absolutely a lesson there to be a little bit. And again, I think that's why Dave Ramsey is so popular. I think that's that practical message of, you know, let's get out of this system that says it's normal to just go borrow and buy everything on installments. No, it's not. Buy less. I mean, holy moly, now I can't buy a phone without installments. Maybe the phone's too expensive. Maybe I need to go buy a cheap one. I mean, I make a few calls and I send a few texts. It's okay. I've got enough, you know, I don't need 900 lenses.
Were you trained that way growing up? Was your household you grew up in that way, or was it something you learned? You know, we talk about redefining success. Did you have to redefine that at some point in your life, or is it just from the beginning you had it?
No, I think so. So, you know, my parents, I wouldn't say we were wealthy at all. I don't know that I'd even say we were middle class. They made a conscious choice to go buy a house in a good neighborhood because they wanted to raise us in a good school system. And I think if anything, I'd probably look back on it and say we were probably a little bit house poor as a result of that. And so, you know, for example, I think from memory, I think I was 13 years old before I ever had a takeaway. Like literally, and that was at a friend's house who ordered some Chinese takeout. So I got my first weekend job when I was 12, and I was making like, I don't know, £5 at the time, $8 or whatever for going out on a Saturday morning and a Saturday night for a few hours. And so from it, I never got free money. I never got, you know, spending or pocket money, whatever you want to call it, an allowance. I had to go work for it. And so from that age on, I always had to work for it. And I think because I had to work for it, and because I started off with such small amounts, you learn how to stretch it. You learn how to be careful and really make it go. And I think that's translated even now. It's funny. I had an interview with Sergey Brin from Google. Someone was talking about how wealthy he is. I mean, you know, $35, $40 billion or whatever. And he made this comment. He said, you know, I might have all that money. I still don't like leaving food on my plate. Like I can afford to, but it still doesn't feel right because he didn't grow up that way. He grew up needing to eat every last scrap on that plate. And I think it absolutely, you know, there's absolutely something there. I was reading another book. I'm a bit of a reader. And so it was talking about CEOs of companies, and it was comparing them to each other. But it was CEOs of companies that were significantly more successful than others around them in the same space. So if you were comparing four, I don't know, Lego building companies who all did 50 million, why did one of them break out and suddenly do 100 when the other three didn't? And what they noticed was every one of those CEOs grew up poor.
Interesting. So they had a concept of, or maybe they were able to live with less. You think that's what it was?
I think there's definitely an element of learning to make it stretch more. And I see it now. I see it with the members. I've got a guy who ordered a Chick-fil-A milkshake and paid DoorDash for delivery.
That means it would be how much? How much would it be?
I was that successful, but dude, I'm not spending $5 to deliver a $3 shake. Like I'm just not doing it. And I'm not criticizing or commenting on them. Like do whatever you want. If you've got the money, all power to you. I just wouldn't be, I will get in the car and I will drive down there and get it rather than spend the $5. And maybe I'm the fool. But I think to stretch it and be careful and make it last. When we opened our first WorkLodge, you know, I'm in there putting all the chairs together to save the money on paying for handymen. You know, I'm asking my friends to come and help me. We didn't have it. It was the only way we could make it work and get it open. Yeah. The other option would be, let's go borrow some money, get a business loan, open it the right way. Well, great, but then I got to pay it back.
Sitting here thinking about the guy with the Chick-fil-A going, now I would have at least ordered 30 nuggets or, you know, like say, hey, Mike, buddy, I'm going to get some things on DoorDash. You want an extra sandwich or two just to eat for lunch and dinner? You know, if we're going to get it delivered, we might as well get a little extra. And I'm going, I don't know if that's good or bad either, you know?
I don't know.
Well, one of the things that I heard you talk about on your podcast, you're talking about really that money is more of a tool. And I think this relates to you kind of said in one of your statements, you're interested in people spiritually. I think sometimes people are interested in people financially. They're interested in people from an ownership standpoint. And my observation, Mike, is that you don't really even perceive that the money is yours, that maybe it's just something you're stewarding over. Would that be a way of saying it? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I'm very cognizant. None of it's mine. It never was to begin with. You know, the Bible's clear about, you know, who owns it all. And, you know, again, I think it's Solomon. I might be wrong. Evidently, I don't know my Bible as well as I should, but, you know, he owns the cattle of it, you know, 1,000 cattle on the hills or something. It may be David who said it in the Psalm, but for me, the way, and I think this is where this laser focus things comes back. So, you know, so let's talk layers for a second, and I'll help you think about how my mind works and processes information. So, you know, this is at the moment a down year. We're not as successful as we were last year. So on one level, we look at it and say, okay, the business hasn't performed as well as it should. On another level, now I've got to say, okay, but if the business doesn't perform as well as it should, how does that affect my ability to give away profit? Because I've got a 501c3 here that's dependent on that profit. So now because the business didn't perform, or because I didn't perform as a leader and find a way to pivot, change, evolve, whatever, better, quicker, faster, now my nonprofit is going to suffer as a result. Well, okay, but now there's another layer, because if the nonprofit can't do what it's supposed to, did I just build 50 less wells? Because if I did, well, that's about 1,000 people that don't have clean water right now because I failed as a leader. And is it a pandemic? Is it a whatever? Yeah, absolutely. But I should have been smart enough to be better prepared for when the down year came. And I wasn't. Could I have maintained exactly the same as last year? I don't know. But now I create this internal pressure because I've got customers I want to serve and I want to serve them well. But I can't afford the same things that I could afford last year, staffing wise, amenity wise, or whatever. But now I've got a nonprofit that I want to serve well, but I can't do that as well as I want to. And as a result, the people the nonprofit's supposed to help, who may literally die without the help we give them, do I want to go to bed at night thinking someone died today because I didn't get clean water to them? Like how many layers down do I go? And so then I dial it back and I'll give you a different example. What if I make a mistake in business and I make a bad decision and it costs us, you know, significantly? Let's say we blew $100,000 on a bad deal. I've literally gone to God and prayed, you know what? I'm really sorry that I've handled this money this way that you trusted me with, because it wasn't mine and I've screwed up. And I don't know if I said it quite in those words, but that's the heart, you know, of what's been there. And I wrestle with that. I wrestle with all of it.
Does that create any pressure, or I'll use a word that we know is in the Bible, anxiety for you? Because not only that, but you've got employees, you've got, you know, building. I mean, you know, how does one operate at peace with those type things going on? And I know there are a lot of listeners, myself included. We've got a for-profit, and then we also have a 501c3 foundation that we funnel our profits that go into that. And it, you know, very likely will have less going into it this year than it did last year also. So I'm attempting to be relaxed and at peace. And, you know, we talked earlier about being hyper focused. I'm trying to just be a little bit more, but what are you doing to deal with that? Is it giving you more stress?
Yeah, I think it is. I think generally, I haven't really been an anxious person in life. I wouldn't say I've never felt stress. You know, clearly I have. But other than when we first opened, and a few nights thinking, what have I done? You know, 23,000 square feet, and you know, 5 members, and 2 weeks away from opening, or whatever it was. Like, is this gonna be okay? Other than that, I don't really remember times in my life when I really felt anxious. This year, yeah, I'm definitely feeling it, and it's different. It's strange. I'm trying to figure out how to handle it, and I'm definitely trying to spend more time with God. I'm trying to spend more time pressing into Him, and I think a lesson I'm having to learn right now, because I feel that, look, the more you get, the more you feel like you want to wrap your hands around it, and the more pressure you feel about not wanting to lose it all. And I'm having to fight hard to keep the perspective of I've got nothing to lose because it's not mine anyway. So I've got to keep that perspective, and I think that's a lesson that I'm supposed to be learning right now, but it's not an easy one.
Yeah, not an easy one at all, and I can definitely relate to that from some things we've been through in the past. Also, Mike, that's a great, I guess, segue into the Gabriel Project, which is something that I've heard you say profits from what you're doing will go towards. And I guess one question as you do that, is that a hard percentage that goes in, or is it just out of the abundance or out of the overflow, or is it a tithe or percentage that you flow to Gabriel? Or I guess they're two separate entities, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So Gabriel's a full-on 501c3, completely separate. So our goal was to give at least 10% of gross revenue right off the top. I didn't want to mess around with net because it's too easy to, maneuver numbers and, well, did you really need to spend money on that? Or again, were you stealing from God as a result? So we've been able to achieve that. Again, I'm not sure what this year will look like. Our goal and our hope is to do that. One of the ways we've achieved that, my wife and I, were able to, because we're not big high spenders, we're able to maybe take a little bit less out of the business for ourselves, and to be able to make that a reality. So it's not placing an undue burden, on the business, although it is a burden. But yes, we definitely shooting for a hard number.
Okay, very good. All right. So having said that, tell us what Gabriel Project is, what it does, what was the impetus for starting it? Because when I communicate with you and I hear you speak and talk about things on the podcast we'll talk about in just a moment, it seems as if you have quite a passion there. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so obviously I've done ministry for years, and it became very apparent that I wasn't built for the business of church. I don't do politics well.
Wait. I gotta stop you there because I'm the same way.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's my business mind doesn't fit well. I don't know. For a while I was going, well, maybe I just don't have the heart for it or something. Have you unpacked why that is that you don't fit very well or built for it?
I have issues on many levels with a lot of things. Look, when I read the New Testament, okay, and I'm just one guy with a very simple, theological perspective, but when I read the New Testament, I see a church that people sold what they had to help each other out. They took collections that they sent to the churches to help people out. I don't see them building big buildings. I don't see them spending a bunch of money on, stuff that is anything other than tangibly helping people. And so I think for my wife and I, our hearts are, whatever we do, whatever we put our money towards, it has to tangibly make the most amount of impact and difference in the life of the person it can. And so that's why we've chosen to do some work locally, but then some projects further afield, because obviously the money goes further. So why wouldn't we do that? And so I wrestled with that. And obviously, look, I get the practical realities. If you want a church building, someone's got to pay for it. But my answer to that is, I don't care. I still don't think it's right to take a bunch of money from people who are working hard, giving it to God, just to pay the light bill and the insurance bill. Go meet in a tent. I don't care if you meet on a field. That could do much more for people, tangible and meaningful, real way. And obviously Solomon built a temple, and obviously it cost billions and it was extravagant. But let's be clear, Solomon was a business guy, and he was incredibly shrewd, and he also happened to be the richest man in the world. Well, you know what? If Jeff Bezos wants to go build a couple of, big churches, all power to him, knock yourself out. That's a completely different situation. And he's got the means to do it without it negatively impacting then what's left to be able to do something with something else. And so that's kind of where I fall on that. So hopefully I'm not offending too many people.
Well, I I have to say, probably one of the reasons that I loved connecting with you, you and I are very close on the same page there. And the words that I like to use is there are a number of people out there that are building their own kingdom and not advancing the kingdom.
Right.
And, building their own kingdom is putting a building up, putting a name on it, and expecting people to come in and sit and listen to you talk, listen to you preach and all that. And listen, I hate to be critical of a lot of that. I mean, we enjoy going in and out of churches, but I love the thought of someone. I also in the New Testament don't see a lot of people that were full-time ministers either, just so you know. I see a lot of people that were working and they were ministering out of the overflow, not trying to get into a full-time ministry gig. But that's a whole nother topic we won't go down. So you guys, tell me how long Gabriel Project has been in existence. Obviously, you're attempting to take some resources and get it directly to people in need. Tell us what those needs are and how you guys are doing there, and where you're at with Gabriel Project. We can also let, if other people want to help, if that's possible, I know it probably is, you can let them know that also.
Yeah, so we started working on WorkLodge formally in 2014. We founded the company, we signed a lease, we opened in the summer of 15. So while we were working on the WorkLodge side of the house in 14, we actually created the Gabriel Project then. So we created it before we'd ever opened. So I was telling people about Gabriel before we even had walls on the floor. And the goal for us, so there's three specific areas that we work in. The primary is children. So orphan children or children in extreme situations. That would be our largest and most important focus. Second would be women, victims of human trafficking, victims of physical abuse. And then the third one that we don't really shout a whole lot about, and we really don't do a whole lot with, occasionally we'll come across folks in situations where maybe some micro assistance is needed. Some unforeseeable situations happen. They weren't prepared for it. They didn't have the means to get themselves out of it. We won't help somebody who could have avoided something or could have planned better. That might sound cold, but we just don't have the means to do that. But occasionally something will come up where we are able to help. Hurricane Harvey, obviously, we made some donations and helped some folks. People's houses flooded that never flooded in 50 years. I mean, I can't hold that against them. So, but that's a very, very small part. The main two areas of focus are the children and the ladies. And so the way that we've tackled that is in Houston, we have a feeding program. We've got some great partners that we work with. We receive about 1,000 pounds of fresh food a day that is sorted and distributed to families in need every single day except for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So 363 days a year. We've done that for a number of years, and it adds up to a significant amount of money. We partner with some organizations. One is Shield Bearer. They provide counseling. We specifically fund counseling to victims of human trafficking. Houston's a hotspot for that kind of thing, if you're not familiar. And in Thailand, we actually work and support a group out there called Shield. In fact, we just got a delivery from them. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but we've got a surprise for Christmas. And so they actually rescue people from those situations, human trafficking, brothels, that kind of stuff. And then they reskill them and retrain them to give them an alternative way to generate income so they don't go back to it. And that's the key for me, is that self-sustainability focus. That's what we're really looking for. We built 3 children's homes in India. Each one houses about 50 kids. We'll likely build more. We just pause on that because we've been working on a water well project out in Cambodia, where the clean water not only helps people have something to drink, obviously, which is what you would expect, good old, drinking water. But what surprised us and what caught us out was they use the water for farming. And so the vegetation grows better, and they take that and sell it at market. So now they've got these little micro businesses that are flourishing or doing better because the clean water is helping them grow better crops or better flowers or whatever it is. And again, that self-sustaining element is what we're really interested in. What we'd like to do, our plan for 2020 that clearly, we haven't been able to pull off yet, but what we'd like to do for anybody listening is, our goal is I want to find a way where we can send ideally at least a couple of people to a developing area, and one of them focus on teaching entrepreneurship, while the other one focuses on the spiritual aspect. And we want to be able to see whether we can go into a village or a small town for a couple of years and make a meaningful, tangible impact in helping them see that they have value, that they were created with value by a God that loves them, that they have skills that they can take and use, that they can generate income and give them some self-worth rather than thinking they are worthless, which is often the case. Can we go in there? Can we change the fundamental life of that village within a small amount of time, like a 2-3 year window or whatever? And then can we replicate it by moving somewhere far enough that they're not going to lean on us, but close enough that we can still be there, do it all again, but then make them self-supporting of each other. And the Grameen Bank guy did this really well. The micro lending guy that got a Nobel Prize, Yusuf something or other, his name will come to me. But one of the ways that it was successful is because they made these community groups where they would hold each other accountable, but also support and help each other. So if one person's business wasn't doing well, all the other little micro businesses would try and figure out how to help. And
doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound really like the Book of Acts church you just mentioned?
Yes, it absolutely does. And so my heart is that's the direction we want to go. But that's going to take partners. It's going to take a lot of people we don't know. The last thing we're going to do is send anybody anywhere without infrastructure in place, without knowing they're going to be safe, taken care of. But the cost element and the funding element is so small for a business who's generating profit that we could do that and self-fund and self-sustain very, very easily. And if you can do it with 2, well, now you can do it with 4, or you can do it with 8. And it can replicate very quickly. And I fundamentally believe that we will pull this off, maybe not in 2020, but we will find a way to pull this off, and we'll find a way to pull it off with some great people. And I think we've got a real meaningful chance here to go out and significantly dent some areas of the world.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question that you may not be able to answer, but it kept rolling around in my head as you were speaking about all that's going on. How significant is your business skill or your business experience in putting together some infrastructure? Listen, there is heart that is involved with what you just mentioned, but there's some hard skills that are involved also, Mike. And I had this thing that came up a long time ago. I mentioned it maybe once on the podcast before, where while I was in Bible school a few years ago, there was a guy that was working on doing some, he was kind of like greenhouses, aqua, some growing food. And I said, hey man, you really should take this to missionaries around the world because they could make some money and they could get some food into, some of these areas. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and looked at me, Mike, and said, we've talked to a bunch of them. He said, some of these people are the laziest people we've ever interacted with. And I'm sitting here listening to you talk about it and going, I don't know if someone, and I hate to say this, I almost hate for this to come out of my mouth, but I'm not sure that someone who doesn't have the business startup, the business skill, can implement some of these things. Do you, I'll just go ahead and lay it out to you, agree or disagree? And where would this be if you didn't have some of the skill that you've got?
Well, I think, look, there was a famous preacher that, alluded to the disciples and said, give me 12 God-fearing guys and, we can go change the world. Obviously, Jesus only had 12 and managed to make a big impact. I think you're absolutely right. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all. I think the average person doesn't have the skill set, doesn't have the drive, doesn't have the motivation, doesn't have the desire, isn't willing to sacrifice. You see it in business all the time. You forget the superstars, forget the Jeff Bezoses, the Bill Gates, the guys who made it really big. 99% of businesses are small businesses. And then you see employees be rich business owners, any success. Well, I should get paid more than that. I made that happen. I've watched debates on it. I've seen them argue about, well, who deserves the rewards, the guy who owns the factory or the people who work in the factory. But what most people fail to recognize and see is that it's a risk-reward ratio. So did you go sign a personal guarantee for 10 years on a lease worth millions? Because I go to sleep every night and that's just one of them. And I've got 3 leases. I think by nature, the Bible proves to us that that's okay. everybody wasn't successful. Jesus didn't come down and say, I'm going to make everybody successful. In the Old Testament, it was okay that some people were more successful than others. And so we have to just accept that's, look, we were created with the ability to learn, grow, develop, create. What we do with that is down to us for a lot of it. And I understand the nature versus nurture and everything else, but there's too many guys who grew up dirt poor in the projects that went and made something of themselves, that you can't just hold that argument and say, well, I didn't grow up in the right neighborhood. I didn't grow up in the right neighborhood. I didn't grow around the right people. I don't have the right connections. But you know what? I got one connection that matters, and he's got all of them. So then I got to figure out how to make sure that my walk with him is right, and I can trust him to do the right thing. So back to your question, does it take skill? Absolutely. But is it skill that can be learned? Absolutely. I built my first WorkLodge. I'd never done a construction project in my life. I never built a home. I never built anything. I mean, I put a couple tiles on a wall in a bathroom. You know, that's about the extent of my construction skill. And we built 23,500 square feet. And I had a general contractor who ran off halfway through the job. Now, you learn real quick, or you lose everything you've got. So you learn. You work 12-hour days, you work 14-hour days, you work 80-hour weeks, you don't have weekends, you don't go on vacation. Again, it's fascinating for me because I get to watch all these different entrepreneurs, and it sounds terrible because I'm not judging anybody, I'm really not. But I find it incredibly coincidental that the ones who don't tend to make it so well are the guys who come in at 10, go out at 3, long weekends, 5 vacations a year. Look, there's a pattern here, and I'm not making it happen, but there is a pattern, and you can't deny it. And then you've got the other guys who are hustling, working late, working long hours, making things work, going out, meeting people, and you know, doing all the things they know to do. And I'm not saying that that's the only thing. Again, there has to be some intelligence there, but I genuinely believe anybody can do anything with the right drive and motivation. For me, it comes from knowing one day I'm going to stand there and he's going to say, okay, Mike, tell me what you did with what I gave you. And I better hope I've got a good answer.
Yeah, that's good. Gosh, we're going up against our time here, and I wanted to have you say a couple things about the podcast, but I'm sitting here going, dang, I really could probably learn a ton from the observations you have with all of your members. You know what? We'll save that for another conversation. We'll tease the listener and maybe we'll come back to that. Not too long ago, you rolled out of bed or decided or purposed, or God gave you the vision to start a podcast. I think I shared with you earlier, I don't know if we were on mic or not, but I just in the last few days have listened to every episode and love it. It's great. You got a great heart. I told you that Linda was pretty awesome. That's your wife. I've had my wife on a few, and she gets all the great feedback. Maybe I'll learn from that. I don't know, but just give us briefly, you know, why did you start it and what are you trying to accomplish? Just give the listener, these are already podcast listeners, so tell us that, and then we'll wrap up with a few questions here, Mike.
I think the goal was to just find a way to be able to get my voice out there a little bit, talk about some of the things we're working on, and hopefully help some other folks, encourage them, inspire them, maybe answer some questions for them. I've wrestled and struggled to find Christian entrepreneurs and business owners that I can relate, guys out there, but I don't know with. I wrestle tremendously with how much do we give? Is it 10% of gross? Is it 10% of net? How do you even do 10% net of what? What is that net of cost of goods sold? Is it net of everything? You know, and who can I talk to? How can I have those conversations? And so because I was struggling to find voices talking about some of the questions I was having, you know, PPP loans. Do I borrow money? Don't I borrow? Is it a loan? Is it a grant? Is it the government help it? I pay plenty of tax. Does it make it okay? Does it not make it okay? Again, there's so much more depth to that conversation for me in the way my mind works, you know, processing that information. So I thought, hey, you know what? Maybe I can spark some dialogue, and hopefully through that, I'll make some connections, and here we are. So evidently I was right just a little bit. And if I get nothing else, then, you know, some new friends and some new connections along the way, then that's great. If I can help some other folks along the way, then that's even better too.
Yeah, and that is it's the Mike Thakur Show, right? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
And available anywhere people listen to podcasts, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm subscribed, I listen, and I enjoy it. So I encourage people to listen. There's so many things we could talk about here, Mike, and I appreciate your perspective on so many things. But what I would love for you to do now is just let the listener know how they can connect with you and send them somewhere. We'll include it down in the notes, but let them know how they can connect with you, and then we'll wrap up with a short question or two here.
Yeah, no, you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram at Real Mike Thakur. And if you want to be professional, we can do the LinkedIn thing too. And obviously the show is anywhere that, that podcasts are. And if you want to see my website, it's just mikethakur.com, THAKUR.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. And we'll make sure we'll include things in the notes. And what's next for you? What are you excited about? What's coming up?
So I think if you'd have asked me that a year ago, I'd have said, more locations, more growth, bigger, faster, better. I'm not sure I'm quite in the same place now that I was, then. I think really what's next on a spiritual level is just continuing to try and figure out a balance of making that time, early in the morning to press in and have that devotion time. Keep trying to seek his kingdom first. That's the most important thing. Keeping that perspective right with the business, trying to lead better with the staff, trying to model well for them through a tough time and through an anxious time. And obviously finding ways to go make this, this Gabriel Project thing happen the way that I want it to. So we're going to keep moving forward and working on it.
Excellent. Well, we're pulling for you, and let us know if there's anything that we can do to help or assist in any way. We have the name Seek, Go, Create, Mike. And I like to ask which one of those words resonates with you more than the other, and why, or jumps out at you, or Seek, Go, Create, which one?
That's a tough one. I like seek. I like that idea of seeking him, but I think it'd have to be create. At the end of the day, we're made in the image of God. God's a creator. That's what he did. We're supposed to go out there and create. If we can create, great. If we can't, go find someone that is and go help them create. But one way or another, we're built for that.
Yeah, Mike, that is so good. I so appreciate you taking the time to share with us and be on the show. And it really, really means a lot to us. And I know it was a blessing to the listener. If you're listening and you'd like to continue the conversation, we encourage that. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you're doing to reach for success, what you're doing to redefine success. And you can find us in so many places. You can go to seekgocreate.com. That's seekgocreate.com, as we mentioned at the beginning. And you can go there, give us your email address, and you will be connected. And you'll also be able to find all our other coordinates on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and of course, Instagram. And we like to dialogue and go back and forth with you there also. Thank you again for listening. We will connect with you again on Seek, Go, Create in the near future.